Welcome back to the Tuesday show. Steve and Eric and Jordan in the A-team, as I like to say. And joining us in the studio, this has been a long time coming. CJ Safer, president of the Institute for Reforming Government. It's been since, last January?
Hey, I think it was January of 2020. I think I was here to talk about National School Choice Week.
Sounds right.
With Vice President Pence in town.
Yeah, and I think that's
the week ago.
I think that's the week I had Vice President Pence on the show on the phone. Yeah, so I mean that sounds right. Welcome back.
Thank you. Everything looks the same.
Exactly the same. Maybe a little dustier because we had all that cleaning, and then as time goes on, are you back to normal at your house? Or you guys are all?
Oh, it's just great. My father-in-law was in town over the weekend. First time I saw him in about a year. So we're just ready to rock and roll. It's going to be a phenomenal summer.
Started off great, although we used a little rain. Although I've been getting some on the south side, but the weather, the temperatures, I love this stuff. I live for this.
And we got a Bucks playoff run.
Yes, I said Bucks in 6, looking pretty good.
Tonight's going to be tough. I think we always got to be careful of the Brooklyn seems down, but they're at home. They're going to give it everything they possibly have. Bucks will squeak by tonight. Game 6, 5-serve. I mean, put down Giannis for 35 and 15. They're going to win by 30.
All right, we shall see. We'll hold you to that. Now, you share with me a parent letter that it's a long list of people around the state that they sent a letter to Governor Evers, Speaker Voss, Majority Leader LeMahieu, members of the JFC Joint Finance Committee, and members of the Wisconsin Legislature. Tell me about the letter, and then we'll dig into some of the details.
Let me start off by telling you a story about Stacy Keene. Stacy Keene is one of the women that we talked to. Stacy is a mother of 3 in Waukesha School District. All Stacy wanted was for her kids to be in school 5 days a week in Waukesha. Last summer, the Waukesha School District hemmed and hawed on whether they were going to be open. They ultimately, 2 weeks before school started, Waukesha School District decided to not be open full-time, 5 days a week. They wanted to do a hybrid version. Stacy, she did everything she could to get her kids into what she says is the best learning environment, which is in the school. She took 2 of her kids, spent out-of-pocket money to send them to private school. The one child she had to stay in the public school. She also had to spend money on a laptop for that child. She had to spend money on counseling for mental health. In all, Stacy, just because of what the Waukesha School District did, she had to spend an incredible amount of money out of pocket. And oh, by the way, she paid full price on her property taxes for a school district that serviced an incomplete product at best. Stacy's story is not unique, although it's incredibly disturbing. Across the state, this happened all throughout the last year, and it was very refreshing to see over 180 parents stand up and had their voices heard. They wrote a letter to lawmakers saying that they want a refund on their taxes because they paid money into a school system that, whatever you think, for whatever reason, open, closed, virtual, they didn't get a full product. They had to either pay out of pocket or they had to send their kids to virtual hybrid school.
In the letter, you cite states like Florida who had made that decision last summer to keep their schools open. I haven't seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, any evidence that making that decision was harmful to kids. But I could make the argument, and a lot of people are saying this, that not having kids in classrooms with that face-to-face learning with their teachers is actually harmful to kids, yet we made that decision here in Wisconsin.
Yeah, according to our friend Dr. Will Flanders at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, the school closures in Wisconsin is going to cost students over $7 billion in lost earnings due to incomplete curriculum. According to the American Enterprise Institute, at the start of 2021, only 20% of Wisconsin's school districts were open full-time 5 days a week. I'm not talking about 2020, 2021. Just recently, they updated it, and according to AEI, about 66% of school districts are open 5 days a week. Compare that to Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis, He had every single school district open 5 days a week starting in January of 2021.
Two things. One, the number, what'd you say, 60 some percent?
66.
Today. That is still stunning. And two, what is it about this COVID dilemma, the pandemic, that we are not, it seems like, moving faster to get back to normal in our state? It seems like we're still, on the school district side of things, still very hesitant, even though other states have proven that it's worked.
Well, look, I'm going to go back to my good friend, Dr. Will Flanders. So he did two studies which warrant discussion. One was recently published in a national peer review journal that showed that school districts that were virtual saw significant declining in enrollment, which means parents are responding. But two, the number one factor of whether a school district was open or closed this year was not COVID, was the presence of the teachers union in the district. So when you take out and when you account for all the noise, that's the number one factor. And I think it's very unfortunate, but you look at some of the things that were influencing the CDC, the reports out of the teachers union lobbying the CDC. At the end of the day, it became politics very recently. And I think, look, when you're talking March, April of 2020, I'm willing, we were in the fog of war, if you will. We didn't know what was happening. Governor Evers issued his executive order on March 18th of 2020 to close all public schools, among other things. We didn't know what was going to happen next. But eventually the scientific evidence came out. There was not a lot of examples, if any, of super spreaders at schools. And then all of a sudden it was fall. And sure, we had upticks in COVID. And that's a whole nother story. It's incredibly devastating. But again, the schools that were open they weren't super spreader events. There was no excuse for school districts not to be open 5 days a week, bare minimum, January of 2021, like Florida and other states.
CJ Safer, my guest here on WTMJ. The remedy is a refund. Do you think that could actually happen?
I think it's an idea that warrants discussion. Look, at the end of the day, when you have over 175 parents from all corners of Wisconsin that are saying, we paid money for an incomplete product, and oh, by the way, we had to pay out-of-pocket expenses. It's essentially the equivalent of buying a car, bringing the car home, and realizing that the car doesn't have a battery. You would take it back for a refund. So yes, I do think it's going to be an idea that gets traction in the Capitol. There's rumblings of legislation, and I would encourage lawmakers and Governor Evers to think really hard about what can we do to help families, especially those who have had so much hardship in the last 12 months.
I think there's a possibility. I don't know that we're going to refund, because there's people that don't have kids that pay full taxes for schools. But I think there's a possibility, and this makes sense to me, to get the money to credit parents for the expenses they've incurred. Some of the things you talked about, having to get a laptop, having to, in some cases, upgrade their Wi-Fi in their home. Those are real costs that a lot of us had to pay for.
Yeah, IRG interviewed some parents in Madison public schools. This is something as IRG wants to be a voice for the voiceless across the state of Wisconsin. And we talked to some parents in Madison, and they told us that there is real learning loss problems that their kids have had. They need access to tutors, not in 2 years or 3 years. They need access to tutors now for the summer, for the fall. This is why there was a huge coalition that was assembled a few months ago with IRG, with Will, with School Choice Wisconsin, with WMC, a lot of organizations that came together and asked the state, look, we are awash in federal dollars. We got to find a way to funnel this money to parents and families so they have access to the resources to help their kids.
Interesting side note is that one of the developments from this COVID-19 pandemic is it's been a boon for school choice, right? We've seen all those schools get impacted by students coming from public schools who weren't fully in classroom, and they've benefited from that. So in that sense, there was a bit of a boon going on there.
There's going to be so much that we're going to be learning about in the coming months and coming years about what happened in the last year. But as I referenced, the study by Dr. Flanders was there has been significant school enrollment declines. that public schools are really going to be challenged to be able to figure out how do we get those kids back. It's going to be a massive issue when the enrollment numbers come out in fall of next year at MPS.
Is there any chance, again, this is just speculation, any chance that we would see in the fall, if the numbers keep declining as they have been over the last several months, that there'll be classrooms or schools in this state that don't have kids in classroom? I can't imagine that scenario.
I can't imagine it either. Mainly one of the reasons is there is just a lack of affordable options for education across the state. I mean, in Milwaukee, we think about school choice. There's vouchers, there's independent charters. That's not the case outside of Milwaukee, and lawmakers have to be more focused at providing educational options for kids everywhere across the state. At the end of the day, as Stacy, the story that I started the segment with, only so many parents are able to take their kids out of public schools and pay out-of-pocket expenses, private school tuition, to send their kids to private schools.
Interesting thing is we will not know the impact on students' learning for a long time. That stuff plays out over years and potentially for the rest of their life. We don't know what's going to happen.
To bring it back to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, he had the bold leadership to open all schools in January of 2021. And what he said on the front lines, he said he thinks it's going to be the number one public policy blunder for those states that didn't have kids in the classroom. And he was talking about Wisconsin.
Future presidential candidate Ron DeSantis?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think given his strategy in dealing with the pandemic in his state, I think that's a smart bet. All right, since we have CJ in the building, lots more to talk about. State budget battles. Other political news, CJ Safer, the president of the Institute for Reforming Government, joining me in studio for the first time in more than a year. We'll pick up the conversation after this. CJ Safer, my guest, president of the Institute for Reforming Government. We talked about the big decisions for Wisconsin schools and the impact on all of us taxpayers of not getting back to the classroom. I want to talk to you about the budget battle ongoing in Madison and the bigger question, which you've been talking about recently. What do you do with the surplus that now, what do they say, $4.4 billion in a couple of years? That's pretty significant.
Yeah, as Dan Adams from Adams Roth said last Friday, quote, happy days are here again.
I guess.
$4.4 billion in more revenue. No, look, let's take a step back for a second. I mean, the budget, the state legislature and the governor have to agree to a 2-year budget, which is it's going to spend over $40 billion. It's going to impact every single family, every single school, every single business. And Governor Evers he started at the beginning, proposed $1 billion in taxes, and he proposed essentially turning a surplus into a deficit. So now the Republicans on the Joint Finance Committee essentially gutted Evers' budget. Not surprisingly, they're conservative. He's progressive. Mm-hmm. They're not going to agree to a progressive budget, nor should they. And right now, the issue is, and to some extent, it's a good problem to have. Revenue numbers were good this time last year. They're really good now, and we are going to have a bit of a surplus. Now, in Right Wisconsin, I wrote last week of, yes, we as an IRG are very supportive of tax cuts and giving more money back to the people. We were supportive of what Speaker Voss is saying, which means we need to cut taxes as much as possible. Agree with that. Having said that, when you dive into the numbers as we did, the Legislative Fiscal Bureau study that showed this massive amount of money coming into the state, a lot of it is due because of the federal stimulus.
Right.
And a lot of it is due to the federal stimulus just pumping money, billions and billions of dollars, which I can get to in a bit, into Wisconsin. And much like we saw in 2008 and 2009, when Governor Walker took office, all of a sudden the feds they put in, they're going to eventually pull out. And all of a sudden we're going to be left without all this federal money. And it's a big concern, I think, for fiscal conservatives.
So that being said, I agree with you. There's some place here for some tax refunding. And we've done in the past. We've given credits and refunds to Wisconsin taxpayers. But there are some areas I think we could certainly spend some money on, not in the way that maybe the governor sees fit, because he's called for even more money for education, public school education. We already give a lot of money to public schools, a ton of money. And again, going back to our earlier conversation, to public schools who weren't in classroom. So, I mean, that's part of it. Is there other areas where you think we could take some of the surplus, again, projected surplus, and put it that would make sense across the political aisle?
So first off, people need to understand how much federal money is coming into the state of Wisconsin.
Well, billions.
Tomorrow, IRG is going to be putting out some stuff, some content on this, some graphics to really try to make the average person understand this. Essentially, through the stimulus, through money that goes to local governments, schools, and the state government, essentially what the federal government has done in the last year is they are matching dollar for dollar what state taxpayers are paying for the state budget. That's how much money. They're basically creating a whole nother state budget. And because of that, state lawmakers, and I will give the Joint Finance Committee credit, you have to take into account the amount of federal spending that's coming in. I think we would do three things that we've recommended. One is cut taxes, especially on the middle class, especially on small businesses. Two, what we need to do is fund course access, give kids and families access to courses that they missed in the last year due to hybrid or virtual learning. And three, as I mentioned in Right Wisconsin, lawmakers need to put money into the rainy day fund and make sure to eliminate any and all structural deficits. This will make sure the state's fiscal position is in the best possible shape for the next budget. Oh, by the way, could be with a new governor.
How about roads and highways and bridges?
Yeah, infrastructure is always going to be a big deal. Infrastructure is the buzzword in Washington, D.C. We're going to see something from D.C. We don't know what it is yet.
Well, they can't agree on anything yet.
Yeah, but right now they're just disagreeing over numbers and what, Senator Manchin, who is essentially, running the U.S. Senate, they're going to come down to some sort of number. Infrastructure is really important. I would always caution and say, let's see, and unfortunately, for better or worse, let's see what the feds are going to do first.
Hey, real quick, I only got about a minute left, but I want to touch on this. The crime in Milwaukee, we've seen the numbers for violence just go crazy, exploding. It will be record numbers. What would you suggest as somebody who looks at government and how it operates that would make some sense in figuring some of these things out? We are not moving in the right direction.
Yeah, over at the Dispatch, the media outlet, they cited something on the Council on Criminal Justice that had Milwaukee and Madison in the top 4 cities in the entire country for percentage increase in homicides. Homicides are up 85% in Milwaukee and 100% in Madison. 85% in Milwaukee, 100% in Madison numbers in the last year. This is an absolute crisis, and this comes off of the Journal Sentinel reporting earlier this year that had, on average, one carjacking occurring in the city of Milwaukee every hour in 2021. It's an absolute crisis. And look, I don't have all the answers right now, but I want to know, where's the mayor? Where's the governor? I mean, this is an absolute crisis that really requires leadership, like what we mentioned last segment about Governor DeSantis and schools in Florida. We need to do something like that for crime right now, because guess what? Summer's just starting, and it's going to get a heck of a lot worse.
That's my fear. You are CJ Safer, of course you are, and you're the president of the Institute for Reforming Government. Let's do it again in a couple of weeks.
Looking forward to it.